On this week's episode of the EV Resource Podcast, a 5-to-1 split for Tesla's stock. Lucid announces a 517-mile range for their Air luxury sedan. The Hyundai Kona EV achieves 637 miles on a test track, and much more. Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the EV Resource Podcast. My name is Zach Hurst, and each week I bring you the latest EV news, information, and answers to your questions about electric vehicles. Special thanks to Titan Auto and Tire in Moseley, Virginia for their support for this podcast. Titan is one of the very few independent shops that are qualified to work on EVs and hybrids, and from hybrids to Hummers, they fix everything. I'm so happy to be back recording the podcast this week for all of you. Last week was just an absolute nightmare trying to take care of this. So I've been looking forward to this all week, and there's a lot of great news stories to get to. Starting with Tesla announced a 5-to-1 stock split. So let's start off with that. Shortly after the close of trading on Tuesday the 11th, Tesla announced a 5-to-1 stock split via its investor relations website. The announcement reads, I quote, Tesla Inc. announced today that the board of directors has approved and declared a 5-for-1 split of Tesla's common stock in the form of a stock dividend to make stock ownership more accessible to employees and investors. Each stockholder of record on August 21st, 2020, will receive a dividend of 4 additional shares of common stock for each then held share to be distributed after close of trading on August 28th, 2020. Trading will begin on a stock split adjusted basis on August 31st, 2020. End quote. As of the close of market yesterday, Friday, the stock has gained 16% since this announcement to close at $1,651. A little perspective, a year ago, Tesla was trading in the low $200 range. What this split means that, in short, every Tesla shareholder will see the number of shares that they hold increase by a factor of 5, and then, of course, the value of the share will be adjusted accordingly. So if you have 10 shares of Tesla stock at, let's pick a round number, $1,500, after the split, you will have 50 shares of Tesla stock at $300. So the actual value of your piece of the company has not changed. But what this does is it lowers the price of each individual share of stock. Now, that is not as important these days when you have a number of brokerage houses that offer fractional shares. So if you had, let's say, $300 today and you wanted to buy a piece of Tesla, well, you could do that. You just wouldn't have a full share of the stock. However, not every brokerage house does that. So this is something that is going to make Tesla more accessible to people that want to buy into the company and have a full share as well. Having a full share does have value to it because you get a voice within the company. You get a vote for investor-related items on the company's agenda. So this is a good thing. But I also think, in addition to the very obvious accessibility of the stock, this also projects confidence from the company that they don't expect the stock to decrease. If you're going to make the stock more accessible and you're going to lower the price of the stock, typically that's going to be something that you are going to expect that the stock will continue to rise. Stock splits are not uncommon. I mean, Apple has done this before. Lots of major companies have had their stock split. And it's not uncommon either to see that the value of the stock increases after that announcement. Now, that's not necessarily why the stock increases, a causation versus correlation kind of argument. I think that Tesla's stock is largely increasing because of the performance of the company, the announcements they're making, and certainly overall expectations of what is to come with their battery investor day on September 22nd. And then, of course, rolling out the Cybertruck, the Tesla Semi, and then ultimately the Roadster, among a lot of other things that have been mentioned recently. I know Elon has mentioned the continued idea of having a smaller compact vehicle and a people mover or a cargo van. So those things are to come. We can expect that. And certainly, from an investor standpoint, I think investors are very confident in Tesla's ability to produce value as well. Okay, and now moving on to Lucid and the Lucid Air. The Lucid Air is a vehicle I have talked about on this podcast many times before. As it's slowly been revealed, we've learned more and more information about it. And Electrek reported earlier this week that the Lucid Air is going to have an EPA range of over 500 miles on a single charge. Now, that is according to an independent test. Earlier this year, they had interviewed Peter Rawlinson, the CEO of Lucid Motors and former Tesla. I believe he was the chief of engineering for the Model S. So certainly somebody who knows what they're doing. And Peter Rawlinson had revealed a few details about the production version of the Lucid Air that is going to be revealed on September 9th. He said that the Lucid Air is going to set a new standard of efficiency and have a range of over 400 miles per charge. Well, we now know that he certainly wasn't kidding. Lucid has released the results of this independent test of the Lucid Air based on the EPA test cycle, and it shows a range of 517 miles. Now, to be clear, the EPA didn't test this, so this is not an official result and therefore not an official range. But it is a good indication of what we can expect when the EPA does finally test it. Now, the press release by Lucid reads, quote, "This new benchmark range was secured with FEV North America Inc. in Auburn Hills, Michigan, applying the EPA's multi-cycle test procedure with the standard adjustment factor. The results confirm that the Lucid Air is the longest range electric vehicle to date." Now, the way the test procedure works, they actually don't drive the vehicle. They put it on a rolling road, kind of like a big conveyor belt that the car sits on. And so the car itself is not actually moving relative to the room around it, just the wheels are moving and the road, if you will, is moving underneath it. So the unadjusted range for the Lucid Air was 745 miles in the city and 730 miles on the highway, or a combined unadjusted mileage range of 738 miles. And the reason that they're saying the range is 517 miles is they have an adjustment factor to calculate in aerodynamics and what can be expected in more of a real world test. So we definitely will need to wait and see what that looks like. But a recent test of actual real world conditions showed that the Lucid Air was able to achieve 450 miles on a single charge. So even that is still the longest range EV out there right now. Now, we don't know exactly what the battery size of the Lucid Air is. It's expected to be about 130 kilowatt hours. That's what they've talked about in the past, which would make it 30% bigger than the battery pack in the Tesla Model S. So it's not really much of a surprise that the Model S, having a range of 402 miles, that the Lucid Air is going to have roughly 25 to 30% more range. Because it has more battery pack. Now, it can be argued, why are we lugging around such a large battery pack when you don't really need that much range? And that's a legitimate argument. But on the flip side of that, I think there's a lot to be said for being able to go on longer trips, possibly round trip trips. I don't know how else you'd say that. Round trip trips. And not worry about charging in any way, shape, or form until you get back home and plug it in. There is something to be said for that. Either way, whether you agree with having a large battery pack or a large range or not, the fact that Lucid is certainly achieving some of these landmarks really pushes further and further away the idea of having range anxiety. And for the general public, people that just aren't in the EV space yet, having something that says, hey, you can go 500 miles without needing to recharge, or you can go 250 miles and recharge half the battery in, I don't know, 20 minutes. I'm making that up. Those kind of things are important for the mass adoption of EVs. Now, does that mean everybody's going to rush out and buy a Lucid Air? Well, no. I mean, the expected price is going to be well north of $100,000. This is a luxury vehicle for a very small percentage of people that can afford that, just the way Tesla started out. Now, Lucid did say they are going to have smaller battery packs, less expensive versions of the Lucid Air. I believe something I was reading that they were estimating one of the smaller versions will only go 315 miles. It's kind of a wonder that as I say that, I said only 315 miles. Well, 315 miles is still pretty impressive. I mean, that's the Tesla Model Y in a nutshell right there. We are slowly stepping into a different world when it comes to talking about EV range and EV battery sizes and what they're capable of. And I think this is just another example of something that is pushing us forwards. Now, the official reveal for the Lucid Air is going to be on September 9th. You can go to their website, which, let me just verify that. Yeah, it's just lucidmotors.com. You can sign up to actually participate digitally, remotely, and customize the information that you want to receive during the reveal event, which is kind of neat. And actually the process of choosing that, their website, I don't know who does their website, but it's fantastic. Sorry, side note. But you go on their website, register for the event, and you won't get all of the information. They are actually tailoring it to you. They give you a couple different choices about wheels or interior or performance or aerodynamics. What do you want to learn about the car? And then they say that they're going to reveal all the information will be available after the reveal event. So if you want to go back and check whatever you might have missed, you can do that. But that is September 9th. So go to lucidmotors.com and you can find out more information about the car. The actual official website still shows a range much less than 517 miles. And I imagine they won't update that until an official EPA test. But if you want to know more, if you're excited about the Lucid Air, I'd love to have a conversation about it. Leave a comment down on the YouTube channel, or send me an email or find me on Facebook or Twitter or something. What do you think about the Lucid Air? Is it a car that, if you could afford it, if you can afford it, are you interested in buying it? Would you be interested in buying it? Personally, I love the way it looks on the front. The rear, not so much. Styling is something that's going to hit everybody in a different way. And of course, with the Tesla Cybertruck, I think revealed that quite a bit. There's a lot of people that like it and a lot of people that don't. I think this Lucid Air is probably more mainstream. It does look like a sedan, your average run-of-the-mill sedan, but the back, for whatever reason, to me, looks like it was just smushed a little bit. It doesn't have a long swooping rear that I tend to like, kind of like the late 80s Toyota Supra, with the hatchback, or the Corvettes that just had a long rear to it. Of course, the reason they don't is because they want to give more headroom to the rear passengers. So I get it. I understand the design. Just not something that necessarily I would choose over some of the other options that are out there. Now, this week, there was another report of a range test. This one was actually a driven range test by Hyundai. Hyundai now, according to Inside EVs, is the world's first manufacturer to undertake an extreme range test to see just how far one of its EVs can travel on one charge. The EV in question here is the Kona Electric, whose 64 kilowatt-hour battery pack allows it to travel up to 301 miles based on a WLTP test cycle, which, once again, WLTP is more of the European test cycle, or 258 miles, as we're familiar with, according to the EPA cycle. However, even if these figures are not the easiest to match in real-world driving conditions, Hyundai took 3 Kona EVs and had drivers do laps of a circuit in Germany, formerly known, I'm going to butcher this, known as Lausitzring. Lausitzring. Sure, why not? Sorry, I'm not good at German. But it's now called Euro Speedway, so I can do that one. And they ran it until the battery was completely empty. They ran it dry. Now, the track itself has a 2-mile tri-oval, which is similar to Pocono Raceway in Pennsylvania, if you're familiar with that. And it took 3 days and several drivers per car to finally bleed the Kona's batteries completely dry. And by that time, all of them had exceeded the 620-mile mark. The exact range numbers were 632 miles, 636 miles, and 637 miles. The power consumption figures were 9.89 miles per kilowatt hour, 9.94 miles per kilowatt hour, and 9.95 miles per kilowatt hour, which is actually way lower than the WLTP figure of 14.7 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. To keep things competitive and maintain incentive through the test, the teams of drivers actually competed against each other to see who could eke out more miles out of the Kona. The average speed, and here's where the key is, the average speed by the 3 cars was around 18.6 miles per hour. All of the cars had the infotainment and all the power-sapping gadgets, including headlights and air conditioning, switched off, and the outside temperature for the test was about 84 degrees on average. This is hypermiling to a T. There are actually fuel economy tests and competitions here in the U.S. anyway. I don't remember if they do it all over the world, but actual competitions where people will take their cars, drive around a track in a closed circuit condition, just driving over and over and over, and see who can get the best gas mileage. So this is similar to that, in terms of range. People who are hypermilers are going to be very familiar with this type of test. And ultimately, I think it doesn't really show something that's practical. Nobody's going to drive around at 18 miles an hour all day for 600 miles. That's just, boring, but just unrealistic, completely unrealistic. But what it does show is that EVs are much better slower, driving in cities, for example, as opposed to highways. If you take an EV on the highway, you're not going to get that kind of range out of it. James, correct me. You've got a Kona, so but if you're doing 70 miles an hour on the highway, you're not even going to get the EPA range of 258 miles out of the Kona. You're likely to get, maybe 60 to 70% of that. That's just a rough estimate. So it's cool. It's a neat test. It makes for great headlines. Certainly it was enough to catch my attention and that I wanted to share it with all of you for the podcast. I would love to see other manufacturers do this. The Lucid Air, for example, could it achieve 1,000 miles if you were driving it in this kind of condition? Could the Tesla Model S achieve 1,000 miles when you're hypermiling it on a closed test track in specific conditions? Probably. I think you probably could. And that, I think, would achieve much more in terms of headlines and all of that. But ultimately, I think when you bring it back down to the real world, people probably just don't care about this. So last week, one of the things that I wanted to bring to you was about the Cadillac Lyriq. GM had their online reveal event, and we got a lot of great information about the first all-EV model from Cadillac, the Lyriq, Lyriq. Car and Driver has put together a one-stop shop for information for the Cadillac Lyriq, from an overview to pricing to what to expect in terms of performance out of the vehicle, range, charging, battery life, as well as looking at the interior, technology, safety, and driver assistance features, all of that. So I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes, but honestly, it's simple. It's just caranddriver.com/Cadillac/Lyriq. But general overview, they say that the Lyriq is Cadillac's first entrant into the luxury electric vehicle market, and it is previewed by a concept car with sharp styling and modern cabin. Cadillac says that both single-motor rear-wheel drive and dual-motor all-wheel drive models will be offered, and that its new SUV will have a driving range of more than 300 miles. The Lyriq has been designed from the ground up and will ride on General Motors' new scalable battery architecture. The company claims a low center of gravity and spacious cabin as benefits of the dedicated EV architecture. The Lyriq should be on sale sometime in late 2022 as a 2023 model. So we have to wait. Pricing, they are estimating that the pricing is going to be below $60,000. Cadillac has been somewhat vague about the pricing, but in a story published by Automotive News, GM's president, Steve Carlisle, was quoted as saying that the 2023 Lyriq can be expected to be priced somewhere in the mid $50,000 range. The Lyriq will come standard in rear-wheel drive form with an electric motor on the rear axle. All-wheel drive will be an option and adds a second motor on the front to drive those wheels. Cadillac has been very slim on details about Lyriq's electric powertrain so far, so we don't know how much horsepower it'll make. Either way, acceleration is sure to be brisk, at least at lower speeds, thanks to the immediate nature of the EV motor's power delivery. General Motors is launching a line of new EV battery technology with the Lyriq called Ultium. The scalable technology allows the automaker to produce batteries that range in size from 50 kilowatt hours to 200 kilowatt hours, although that largest one is said to be reserved for most likely the GMC Hummer EV SUV that they're coming out with, or SUT as they're calling it, for more of a sport utility truck. Cadillac claims that the Lyriq will offer a battery of about 100 kilowatt hours worth of capacity and should be capable of driving ranges of more than 300 miles per charge. DC fast charging capability will be standard, thankfully. It should have been on the Bolt and the Spark, but thanks GM for finally getting the message. Shoot, I lost my place. Okay, DC fast charging capability will be standard, but the Lyriq will also be able to charge on home power outlets as well. The Lyriq concept vehicle shows a spacious interior with seats for 4 and a center console that divides the 2 front and 2 rear seats with a touchscreen for rear seat passengers. We're not sure how much of that will make it to production, but we expect 3 across seating in the second row. Cadillac says using the dedicated EV architecture allows for a more airy and open cabin with plenty of space for passengers to get comfortable. The Lyriq's dashboard, similar to the new 2021 Escalades, is dominated by a giant 33-inch curved LED display that serves as both the SUV's infotainment system and the driver's gauge display. In the Escalade, the infotainment system can be controlled by a click wheel on the center console, a boon for drivers who aren't fond of touchscreens. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and Wi-Fi hotspot are all expected to be standard features when the Lyriq finally rolls into Cadillac showrooms. The Lyriq is going to offer Cadillac Super Cruise, which is their semi-autonomous driving technology. Key features of that are going to be standard automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, available lane departure warning and lane keeping assist, and adaptive cruise control with semi-autonomous driving modes. So all in all, I think this is a good step forward for GM, certainly for Cadillac. This is going to be a luxury vehicle. They do that really well. All in all, I think this is an example of what GM plans to bring forward and offer to the public. And if that's the case, then I think this will be successful. However, a lot of the stats that we're hearing, 300 miles of range, 100 kilowatt hour battery, even if it was a little bit bigger, coming to us in 2 years as a 2023 model, is it really going to be able to compete with the vehicles that come out at that point? You know, I think this might be a little bit behind the curve, as it were. GM has the capability of putting this out there right now. I'm not sure why they wouldn't be, but they certainly can. They have the technology, they have the people, they have the know-how. So it's a little disappointing that it's not coming out sooner than 2 years down the road. So that is all for the news this week. I did actually come across kind of an EV question myself this week. Well, the last few weeks. I don't know if where you all live, you've been getting the same amount of rain that we have been getting here in Central Virginia, but we have been getting dumped on, and it's been causing a lot of flooding. And over the last, I don't know, 5 years or so that I've been interested in electric vehicles, probably longer, over and over, people question, well, how do they do in water or rain? There have been some polls out there that people have responded thinking that you can't wash an EV because you'll get shocked, or you can't charge it in the rain, or you can't drive it through a puddle, or so many myths and misconceptions about EVs being electric vehicles and water. Can you drive an EV through a massive flooded puddle? So I myself have been experiencing a lot of flooded roads in the Chevy Spark EV, and so I've got a couple of videos that I want to show you. One of them I already posted on YouTube if you guys have seen it. Some water rushing down the road and just coming up over the front of the car, which is kind of crazy. I'll put that in here too. But just, yeah, the answer, of course, if the question is, can you drive an EV in the rain? Can you charge an EV in the rain? Can you wash an EV? Can you get water anywhere near an electric vehicle? The answer is absolutely yes. They honestly are better in horrible, rainy, flooded road conditions than I think other cars would be, because most internal combustion engines, well, not most, all internal combustion engines have an air intake where air goes from the outside of the vehicle into the engine. If you get water in the intake, water doesn't compress inside the cylinder the way air does. So, in fact, it really doesn't. So if there's too much water in there, the pressure can actually break things and ultimately can cause the engine to hydrolock, completely seize. So it's one of those things, like in my gas-powered cars in previous lifetime, it feels like I would kind of hesitate if I saw the road flooded a little bit or a deep puddle, because I'm going, I don't want to risk it. Now, just drive straight through it. It's no big deal. So check these out. I think you guys will enjoy watching this just as much as I enjoyed driving through it. And I'm getting a thrill out of just the immense amount of rain that we're getting, the flooding. I think it's pretty cool. Obviously, I'm not being affected negatively by it. So if that were the case, then I'd probably feel very different about it. But check that out. Stick around then. A couple announcements before we end for this week. Here's a little bit of water. Whee! I kind of want to go back around and do that again. Man. Holy crap. That's a decent amount. I mean, oh my god. I'm gonna have to take these off. I'll lose them otherwise. Holy shit. Oh my goodness. Look at that. That is just... Alright. Here we go. Oh my god. Wow. That is serious. Oh man. Alright, so that is all for this week. Thank you as always to everyone who supports the show, either by simply watching, listening, or sharing with your friends. Please share it with your friends that you think are interested in electric vehicles. A special thank you, of course, always to our Patreon supporters. Patreon is a website where you can support creators with a small financial contribution. In our case, $1, $5, or $10 a month, which really is not a whole lot, but on an individual basis, but obviously collectively it means very, very much to all of us here at EV Resource. You can find us there at patreon.com/EV resource. That's patreon.com. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are trying to get 100 subscribers. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it would mean a lot to us. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I invite your feedback for the show, so send an email to hello@ev-resource.com. And if you want to listen to any of the previous shows, you can find them on the webpage under the podcast section and on many of the major podcast platforms. So thank you very much for being with me, and I'll catch you all next week.